even for me. Okay, so we are here on March 15th, 2021, and this is, to my reckoning, I think class 20 of the Buddhist Neigong series, and this will be the final class for this series. I started this, I think, some 20 whatever weeks ago, probably a few more than that, because I suspect we might have missed a class or two since then. But really, this class was inspired by the quarantine of the time that we were in it then, with the pandemic and everything, and wanting to address two populations basically. The first one being the Aikido students, that we are at such a disadvantage when we can't connect and make full contact the way we'd like to. Aikido has got a lot of bad reputation right now as not being worthy of the octagon or whatever. And I just have to say that the art is exquisite, and it's subtle, and it creates a really unique frame of mind and sensitivity with other folks being in full contact. The way we can practice is just a gift to the world, I think. And but it depends really on that contact. And in pandemia, we couldn't. So it actually created an opportunity to focus on the internal power stuff, which is an important part of the art that usually we kind of don't pay as much attention to because we put all of our attention in technique and in rolling around and fun stuff. So we took advantage of the pandemic time, focused on the internal stuff, and then at the same time, it seemed a good opportunity for me to express some of these teachings for the Zen Buddhist community that I serve, because it's actually a core part of the tradition as well. Bodhidharma, as we've seen throughout the course of our studies together, these are integral awarenesses, and Zazen itself is actually a very important, body practice, right? So, with that impetus in mind, we've come to something like a full circle. I set as a goal to introduce the Mo Wai Dan set, and felt that to be able to even approach those, there was a lot of beginning teachings that needed to happen, and they have, to the best of my ability, for better or worse. I've given a picture of how I understand these things at this time. I expect that as I continue to train and practice for another decade or two or three or four, my understanding will deepen. And I may well, at some point in the future, have a different view than the ones I expressed in these videos. However, these views are mine, and they are in accord to my knowledge with my teacher and the tradition that I come from. And yet, all the good stuff, I'll say, came from teachers more skilled and better than I, and all the mistakes are firmly mine. So, that being the record for these things. And with that, I'm going to try to, as best I can, let's see if I have it here, give some kind of an overview. Oh, here, it sits here, of the classes that we did together. I've been keeping notes of them such as I can. Um, yeah, and some of them are less helpful than others. But we started talking about structure and bones and just standing, just the basic standing posture. And it can't be overstated the importance of still standing and understanding the bones and the structure of gravity through the system. And then from there, we began to look at energetically aligning the body. And so there's a whole art to simply standing. And as you can see now in the context of the class and its somewhat fullness, the Dhammo Waidan is a series of standing postures. It's a whole bunch of these things, right? So the very first one we did was sort of like the global kind of get it ready. And then we started to fill in some perspective. If you can recall, we started looking at breathing in very specific ways throughout the body. We looked at contractive inhale, expansive inhale. We looked together at 5 gates breathing, breathing in through the central channel, through the arms and through the legs into the Dan Chen, and all of that kind of breath work. And we spent some time, we really lingered actually to make sure that we had enough background and exercises to get some sense of this. We talked about breathing in from the front, back, sides, up and down, and all of this stuff. Once we got that together, then we did some micro and macrocosmic circulation. to get some sense of what it is to bring the mind's attention through the body in a meaningful way, not simply as a passive, what do I feel, and relax, move, but actually as an active creator of an enhancer, really, of a natural flow of chi through the body. And so once those teachings were given, then, if I remember right, then we were able to finally move into the Mo Wai Dan, and we began the set itself. And in the last couple of classes, it hasn't been so much new content. It's been more like guided practice of the Mo Wai Dan set. And there we are. So my hope is that anyone who's made it this far through, first, congratulations. Your patience is impressive to me. And then secondly, you should have a pretty full, thorough background to be able to do these Dhammo Waidan. I would like to say that you can overdo these exercises, and the art itself evolved. Uh, I don't quite want to say past these moves, but it recognized certain lack, put it that way, in static training. And so the next evolution of this art, in my understanding, is that it moved into open palm practices, which were again static postures, perhaps the likely subject of another series of classes that I'll do at some future time on the subject. And then from there, it started to turn into movement practices. So, what you typically would see is a Qigong movement where someone's doing these kinds of things. And there's all kinds of ways to work with those. From the beginning, I've held up the eight brocades as like sort of the stock standard. Everybody should have those movements kind of in their hip pocket. To those who practice Aikido, you'll recognize much of that in our typical, what we think of as being a warm up, which actually is not a warm up. It's some nod to the solo forms and the internal art. But we in the West typically are introduced to that as a warm up. But you'll notice there's some movements there that are very much the same, some that are different. But those eight brocade movements, plus the two meridian stretches that Dr. Liu, another important influence for me, added to the set, I think those are go-to longevity practices, right? For health and longevity for everybody. Not just for martial folks, not just for folks who are studying Zazen, for folks who would like to live optimally, healthfully, and lengthy. It's good for you. All right. So with that attempt at a summary and having a few folks here, I'll open for any global questions or specific questions. I'll do my best to respond to them if there are any. And if not, no worries. But if so, let's see a gasho and we'll have some conversation. And so on. Thank you. Everybody nervously stares at the screen for a minute. Just kind of
Uh,
say something.
you mentioned that we could overdo this,
Yeah, man.
and that was a question that I was going to ask. Uh, what what's overdoing it, and what would be a sign that we have overdone it? Not that I'm in any danger of that right now, but
Well, you need to sleep. You need to eat. And it's important also to realize that these Dhammo practices are not the sum total of one's body practice. You need to do something that works, that gets your heart rate going, like cardio. Like that's a good thing. It's really good to do something where you're pushing against resistance somehow, that your muscles are dealing with uh, resistance and load, right? Flexibility is important. There's a lot of different areas to the thing. So, one way of overdoing it would simply be to do these exercises at the exclusion of anything else. I think that would be a mistake. I think they're excellent. I think they're beautiful. I don't think they're sufficient as the only thing a person were to do. So that would be one way. You know what I mean? Another way would be that if you really don't take the next step and start doing the eight brocades and all you did were the static stuff and then stop and let it circulate, I feel that could very well be insufficient for chi circulation in the body. It doesn't do a hell of a lot to address chi moving through the leg meridians, for example. The only place we really address that is in the macrocosmic orbit, and it's not that robust, to be frank. If you take the first movement of the eight brocades where you're kind of doing this kind of thing, I mean, if you know what you're doing, and I will explain those in time, but you're bringing the chi all the way up from the earth through the legs up into the hara and then out the central channel outside and gathering it up again. This is a massive circulatory system for your ethereal body or your chi body. If you never do those kind of movements and you just do these static things and then relax and let them circulate, I doubt that that quality will be cultivated the way it ought to. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, that's good.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, yeah, I think that's my basic response.
Cool. Thanks.
Anybody else? All right, good. Well, I want to thank everybody for your engagement in the class. And I want to say if you're observing this sometime in the future, you're welcome to reach out to me. I have to say comments on YouTube are very difficult for me to notice. For whatever reason, people put comments and I don't even see them. They don't show up in my feed in any recognizable way. Um, so I wouldn't suggest trying to reach out to me personally that way. I think if you were to go to Buddhist Temple of Toledo or Shobu Aikido of Ohio as a Google search. There's websites there, and you can connect to me there with their general information. It'll find its way to me. That's probably the easiest way. I also have a text service that I'm using right now, but who knows if I'll be doing that forever. So I'll just leave that aside for now and just point you to Buddhist Temple of Toledo.org or Shobu Aikido of Ohio, SHOBU AIKIDO, and connect with me that way. And I'll try to help you as much as I can. All right, everybody. So those who are here, hang out. For everybody else, I'm going to hit the end of record. It's been an awesome class. I hope everybody's enjoyed it and got something useful out of it. We will pick this up again. We will move the ball further down the court at another time. But for now, this is at a completion of a cycle. Thank you, everybody.